Alrighty. You gonna say hello, Peach? So I am hanging out today at home with my cat Peaches, and she's a bit hungry. She's always hungry. She's a bit of a glutton. She likes to eat a lot of food. But yeah, so we're hanging out at home, and I thought I would get on here for you guys and do a Pete's 2 cents and answer some more of these questions on Instagram. I harassed you guys this week when I asked you guys to ask me anything. I asked you if you would prefer these just on the podcast each week or if you would prefer it on Instagram, and it seemed like most of you replied saying both, so I guess I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and I'll try and get into a rhythm of doing Pete's 2 cents each week. But yeah, it's been a good week. It's been cold, guys. It has been so cold here in Melbourne. I think last night it got down to 3 degrees Celsius, so only 3 degrees above zero, apparently. And so yeah, I was freezing my butt off in bed. I think I wore a t-shirt. Normally when I sleep, I'm just in my jocks, right? My undies, my underwear. And I'm one of those people who under the covers gets a bit hot. So unlike my wife who can wear a full tracksuit and be underneath the quilt and be, cuddling me or cuddling the kids, I have to be, effectively naked with undies on, just with undies on. And that's all I can handle. So yeah, anyway, I had to put a t-shirt on, and I think I wore socks as well. So first for everything, but I don't remember doing that for a long time. Anyway, I am currently making coffee, so hopefully the noise in the background isn't too irritating, but I'm going to open up Instagram here, and I am going to shoot over to the question that I asked this week and find the questions rather, so that I can start answering them. So give me 1 sec. It's interesting, I'm actually recording this using my phone device, or the microphone that I've got for my phone, so I can walk around and do things at the same time. Okay, so opening these up. Also, once again, thank you so much for all the questions, guys. You guys are so passionate about Australian English and about all that sort of stuff, so I love getting these questions. Okay, right off the bat, straight away, Fantin, I assume it's a French name, Fantin, if not. But Fantin asks, do you like horses? Horses, mate. You know what's funny? Noah, my son, his favourite animal at the moment is horses for some reason. I don't know if he's ever seen a horse in real life, but he's been watching loads of TV shows and loves always learning about science and everything like that. He's always like, Dad, show me bones in the human body. Dad, show me the organs. Show me the animals. Show me how recycling works. So, yeah, he's probably seen a bunch of horses on TV shows recently or something, and for whatever reason, it's become his favourite animal. To be honest, I don't like or dislike horses. They kind of freak me out to some degree. Like, I feel like they're... When you don't know much about horses, they seem like pretty dangerous animals, to be honest. Like, I'm just going to make the coffee while I answer this, guys. I had a friend, when I was at a high school, one of my friends used to do, I think it's the biathlon? I can't remember what it was. She used to ride horses, but she also did shooting and skiing and fencing and a bunch of these other things. So I think she did one of those athlon things where I think it involved fencing and horse riding. I think the biathlon's traditionally skiing and shooting, so I don't know if she was doing that as well as the horse riding one and fencing and whatever. But she, it freaked me out. Horses freaked me out because I think she was practicing, she was riding a horse, she was doing something, and she walked behind the horse, and I think must have startled it. And I'm sure you guys know where this story is going. The horse kicked her in the face, and I think she broke her jaw and lost a few teeth. And so I remember seeing her come to school and, effectively having had surgery on her face and being like, oh my God, what happened, mate? Are you okay? Blah, blah, blah. What's the story? And she was like, I got kicked in the face by a horse. And I think from that point on, I was kind of like, these animals freak me out. And I think I've probably only ever ridden a horse a few times when I was a little kid. And so it's one of those things where I try and be sensible when it comes to confidence and animals that I don't really know much about, right? In terms of how to interact with them. It's the same with like cows and I don't know. When you go to a zoo, you're not going to put your arm in the lion's cage, right? Because you don't know. It might be friendly, but probably isn't. So horses, I kind of treat like that. I don't mind looking at them when they're in paddocks, doing their own thing. But yeah, they're just so big. They kind of freak me out. And I think we were talking about this in a previous episode somewhere. Horses are the animal in Australia that actually account for the highest number of deaths for humans. So whether they're getting, driven into by cars, right? A horse escapes and runs across the road. If you hit one of them compared to, say, hitting a rabbit, you're, much more likely to be put in hospital or even die. But also people falling off horses or getting kicked by them, all that sort of stuff, means that they end up killing a lot more people. So yeah, I don't know. Long story short, I don't dislike them. I'm sort of wary of them. I don't know enough about them to really, feel confident around them. But I don't know. It's one of those things too where I really don't like things like the horse racing industry and everything. And, in Australia recently, I think in the last few years, we found out that a lot of horses are being bred, raced, and if they don't perform well, they get sent to the knackery, right? Which is effectively an abattoir where they turn the horse into meat, dog food, and glue. So yeah, they were just breeding a lot of these horses, and if they didn't race well, they'd kill them and breed some more. So I'm not a fan of that industry. But yeah, okay. So I'm going to sit down here with my coffee and might have a sip. Hopefully, I'm not making too many weird noises. Let's keep going through these questions. Okay, so this one comes from, I guess it's English. Ingly _SH. For me, podcasts are hard to understand. Do you have anything for intermediate level? I would say that the majority of my podcasts are for intermediate to advanced learners. So, yeah, this is an interesting question to answer. If you're an intermediate learner, I would probably say focus not necessarily on simpler content, but shorter content, if that makes sense, right? So when I was learning French and when I first started learning Portuguese as well, I wanted to get as quickly as possible to listening to studying native level content. But when you're an intermediate learner, you kind of have to reduce the length of the thing that you're studying, right? It's not, if you're having trouble listening to a podcast like this, you're not going to be as efficient with improving and learning and studying properly if you're just watching or listening to, an hour's worth of really advanced content, if you can't follow much of it. Whereas if you can get something that's, say, 5 minutes or maybe even a minute or 30 seconds worth of native level content, and when I say that, I mean the person isn't dumbing things down. They're not speaking unnaturally slow, hey, Mike, how are you? Good, Pete, and you? That stuff I feel like really doesn't help you improve after a certain point in the beginning. And I find it kind of patronizing when English teachers who are purportedly teaching advanced or intermediate students do that. It's not helpful. I don't feel like it prepares you for interacting with normal human beings. We're not robots, so it's just going to get you to be better at, speaking like a robot and understanding robots. So I guess my takeaway here would be find the shorter episodes that I create and actively study them. So if you're an intermediate learner and you're still not hearing all of the words that are being said, perhaps you need to learn a lot of the vocab being used, perhaps there's grammar you don't necessarily understand, it's going to require study more so than just passive listening to be able to learn those things as quickly as possible, right? You may be able to learn them passively over time, but it's going to be a lot slower to do it that way. If you sit down and actively study, print out a transcript, read whilst you listen, repeat the episode multiple times, highlight new words, highlight grammar that you don't know or don't understand, look it up, research it, do some exercises to learn it, use it in conversation. That's how you're going to improve really quickly and move from intermediate to advanced. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend trying to find simpler podcasts where people are speaking more slowly or they're talking about very basic topics or things you're not interested in, I would say find content that you're already interested in and then just study snippets of it. You could still study a long episode, but chop it up into certain parts, do a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes at a time, repeat, and you'll get better. And I guess a good example, excuse me, would be, and I'm trying to apply these kinds of lessons to learning guitar at the moment. I've picked up the guitar again and I'm trying to learn to play guitar. And so I'm trying to learn a bunch of songs, right? At the moment, I'm learning some Tool songs. One of them is The Patient. And there are different ways of trying to learn these songs. You can start the song from the beginning and just play through it following tab, which is tablature. So that's the way that it's written out so that you can read it. You could use music notation. You could do it by ear. You could do it from start to finish, right? So you play the entire song. But instead, what I do is I try and focus on little sections at a time so that I can master those and then move on to the next section. And then once I kind of have a feel for all the different riffs, maybe the different chord progressions, and I've practiced each of them in isolation on their own, I'll then try and sort of put it together and play the entire song, right? So I think there's something to be said for studying smaller bites of whatever it is you're trying to get good at, and then, expanding as you get better into more advanced, longer material. Hopefully that makes sense. I hope that helps. Virginie asks, how can I get rid of my French intonation? And the first thing that comes to mind is someone who's learnt French. It's probably a bit of a smart-ass comment, but what intonation? French is a very flat language, right? There isn't really a lot of intonation, which is probably what you mean, right? In English is a much more up and down kind of language with stress-timed syllables, right? That's what the schwa is. We have these reduced syllables, whereas French is I don't think they have reductions the same way at all. It's just each syllable gets the same amount of time when you're speaking. And so I think that's what you mean. You want to change the way that you don't intonate when you speak English to being able to intonate, say, like a native speaker, like myself. And for those of you who may not necessarily know what I'm talking about, intonation is where you emphasize certain syllables in words, but also where the pitch in the phrase or the sentence goes up and down. And this can happen at the level of the word if there's multiple syllables. It can also happen over a phrase, right? So if I said something like, how are you going? At the end of the phrase there, you'll hear it dipping down. How are you going? But I could also change it if I wanted to show that I'm a little bit excited and say like, oh, how are you going? And it's going up at the end. How are you going? So there's a lot of different advanced aspects to intonation in English. English is one of those languages that has a lot going on in terms of intonation compared to, say, something like French. How would you learn this? I would, if it were me, I am the kind of person that does a lot of learning by ear. And so I wouldn't necessarily sit down and study in books to try and learn all of this. That does help, and it is useful to go away and try and do lessons on intonation and sort of learn a little bit about it like that. But what I would be doing is listen and repeat exercises. So whether that's, you find a course or you're listening to a short podcast or some audio or something or watching a TV show, it's listening and repeating after the person who is speaking and trying to copy their intonation. So the reductions that they're using, the way that certain words are being pushed sort of up in terms of the pitch when they're spoken or pushed down, and then learning stuff like sarcasm, questions, surprise, and how we use different intonation in English to sort of show those things, right? So like, a good example intonation-wise, especially in Australian English, is say using the phrase good on ya, right? So if I just say the phrase in a sentence, good on ya, it's going down there because I'm just sort of stating it, right? Good on ya, good on ya. It's just a descending intonation, good on ya, good on ya. If I were to use this and I was telling someone good on ya, as in they did a good job, I would say it in a more happy, excited kind of way, like, oh, good on ya. Good on ya. So it still kind of goes down at the bottom, at the end rather, but the middle of it lifts up intonation-wise. Good on ya. Oh, good on ya. Good on ya. So if my son did something really impressive and he was like, Dada, look at me, I'm doing a handstand, I might be like, oh, good on ya, mate. Good on ya, mate. Mate. And you'll see in the word mate, it starts low and goes high. Good on ya, mate. Good on you, mate. Well done. And I've raised the pitch of me talking up to show that I'm impressed, shocked, surprised, and happy. Oh, good on you, mate, instead of, oh, good on you, mate, right? So there's a lot of aspects to this. Whereas if I was being sarcastic, so if someone walked over, I don't know, when I'm having a coffee and pushed it over accidentally, I might be like, oh, good on ya. Oh, good on ya. And that one's sort of gone down then up, right? Oh, good on ya. So it's gone down then up, and that shows sarcasm. So the person listening to that, if they're a native speaker, isn't going to think that I'm saying, well done, good job. Instead, they're going to be like, oh, what did I do? Or they may even take offense and be like, screw you, dude. Like, I didn't mean to. So they're the two differences. Oh, good on ya. Da-da-da. And da-da-da. Good on ya. So, yeah, the easiest way to master these things is to just mimic native speakers using it. So I would find someone that you want to copy, that you want to sound like, and I would be focusing on things like finding statements that they say, focusing on the intonation for them, finding questions and focusing on the intonation. Sometimes questions can be rising at the end, they can be falling, focusing on the intonation of words in sentences. What happens with certain long words, short words, words that are important, that get emphasized, ones that don't. And just, again, listen, repeat, listen, repeat, listen, repeat. That's what's really going to help you internalize the rules instead of, say, just reading them in a book and thinking, oh, I'll just memorize them. Because, it is one of those things. You can read and understand the rules, but not necessarily use it. The way to learn to use it is by learning, by using it, if that makes sense. Okay. Tyler, good evening from rainy Hodgenville in the United States. I absolutely love your podcast. Well, thank you, dude. I'm impressed that you're listening. It's funny, I've got a lot of native speakers from other countries, like America in particular, who listen to the podcast, and I'm always kind of shocked that they have found it and, listen to it, because I imagine they already speak English. But I guess they're interested in Australia. All right, keep going. How can we use the word pal in Aussie English? Excuse me. So, pal, this is more of an American word, I think, for friend. And you could use it both seriously and sarcastically, I think, in American English, right? What are you doing, pal? It sounds weird with an Australian accent. They might say, what are you doing, pal? And it's sort of like, what are you doing, mate? I think mate is what I would use, obviously, much more frequently in Australian English. Pal, if you were to use that, I think it just doesn't sound as natural, especially if you speak with an Australian accent. Like, if you were to use it, Australians would understand you. He's pals with this guy. He's friends with this guy. He's mates with this guy. Buddies with this guy, right? He's pals. He's got a few pals, yeah? He's got a few pals at daycare. Noah's got a few pals. You could use it. It's just not the most common choice of words for Australian English speakers, if that makes sense, right? We would go to other choices more frequently than to pal. The same way that if you hear an American sort of saying mate, it almost sounds a bit sarcastic because you're kind of like not used to them saying that. Instead, they would say something like buddy or pal or something. They wouldn't be like, oh, hey, mate. It sounds like they're making fun of you, at least as an Australian. So, I'm not sure there's a really easy way to make that sound Australian. Just go with mate, right? When in doubt, go with mate. Hi, Pete. How do I use cheers, thanks? Greetings from Berlin. So this one comes from Grayelli. So I assume you don't mean that as a single phrase, but instead as the individual words. They all mean thank you, right? But they're informal. So if you were to use it's informal, cheers, informal, and thanks. Thanks, you can use anyway, but it's a shortening of thank you, right? Thanks. So, at the moment for me, I most commonly use ta with my kids. It's something that we often teach our kids to say in order to say thank you when they're really young because it's a single syllable, right? So they have to just say, thanks is a single syllable, is a single syllable, but it's harder to say because you've got like a th and an nks consonant cluster in there. So it's quite a difficult word to say. Thanks. So we teach our kids ta. It's very easy, right? There's one consonant and one vowel. Ta. So yeah, you'll most frequently hear it with children, or people interacting with children. So yeah, I'll be like, Joey, what do you say? My daughter, Joanna, will be like, what do you say? And she'll be like, ta. Or Noah will come up and be like, can I have some chocolate? And you give him some chocolate and he'll be like, oh, ta. So yeah, ta is most commonly used, I think, at least for me in my current stage of life where I have a lot of, I'm around small children all the time because of my own kids. That's where I hear ta being used the most frequently. I would use cheers and thanks more commonly. So yeah, if someone gave me something, cheers. And it's just a way of saying thank you. You can also obviously do it when celebrating something and having a drink, right? You want to give someone cheers or say cheers to someone. But you can also in Australian English use it as a way of saying thank you. Someone brings you a coffee at a cafe, cheers, thanks. You could say ta as well, there's nothing wrong with that. I would just go for cheers and thanks probably before ta. So yeah, don't stress, use them all and see the kind of responses you get. Listen out to what people use too, like if you're in, say, Australia or you're, around Australians, what do they say? What do you hear them saying? This is a good way of sort of learning how to sound more native or natural when speaking English. When you're surrounded by people who speak a certain dialect, paying attention to the word choice that they, use when speaking. What words are they picking? Do you hear them using certain words? Are they avoiding certain words that you may know, like pal, right? Do you hear Australians saying pal? If they don't use it, what are they using in its place? And don't be afraid to ask people too. You can always just say, how would I use these words? To someone you're having a conversation with, especially if you're friends with them or they've got a bit of time, right? I mean, I wouldn't walk up to a stranger and be like, hey, how do I use ta, thanks, and cheers? But if you know someone, don't be afraid to ask them those sorts of questions. Okay, what do we got here? Mary. Wait, it looks like she may have continued a single. Okay, she's given me multiple messages with the same question. My concern about immigrating to Australia is being isolated, to be stuck inside and lose the opportunity to travel abroad as much as I do. Is it true? Well, I think really it's going to come down to your personal circumstances, right? Like, you can come to Australia and still travel abroad if you're, loaded. You've got a lot of money, or if your job requires you to go abroad, there's no reason that you couldn't go abroad. It's just everything's further away, right? Like if you're currently living in somewhere like the Middle East or Asia or Europe, there are probably a lot of other countries that you could travel to pretty quickly that are nearby compared to Australia. We're relatively isolated geographically, if that makes sense. So yeah, by definition, when you come to Australia, you are becoming a little more isolated in terms of geography, right? You're further away from other countries, but there are people here too, it's a smaller population. Again, it's going to depend on where you're living and what you're doing. So, I'm a native-born Australian who speaks English fluently and I've lived here my whole life, but to be honest, I feel pretty isolated at the moment because I work from home, I have small children, and I just don't have the excuse to kind of go out there and meet people, and I definitely don't travel very much at all at the moment because, small family and paying a house off. So it can happen to anyone, whether you're a migrant or not. So I think with these sorts of things, you just have to consider what you want from life and the kind of lifestyle you want to live. And if that doesn't work well with moving to Australia, then, you don't have to move to Australia. I'd try and set up the life that you want to live. Whether or not you end up coming to Australia isn't necessarily the, primary goal, I assume. So I would be working out, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? Do you want the ability to live somewhere that speaks English, but, you can travel overseas really easily? Then, I'd probably go somewhere like Great Britain, right? You can go to so many different European countries, or even the US, right? There's Canada, you've got South America, Central America, all there too. So yeah, you just have to kind of work out what you want, and you make the rules at the end of the day, right? So it is probably one of those things that a lot of people don't think about as much as they should, myself included, about, what kind of life do you want in 5 years, 10 years, well, tomorrow? What do you want in the future, and how do you set things up, whether it's a career, whether it's people you're around, whether it's a relationship you're in, whether it's the place you're living? How do you set those things up so that you are as happy as possible? Okay. Hey, Pete, can you please tell me about dating culture in Australia? Okay. So this one comes from Nov. I think I've done a podcast on this, so definitely search Dating Culture Australia in the Aussie English podcast, because I have covered this in the past. And I think when I covered it, I was probably closer to that stage of life when I was dating people. I've definitely been out of the game for more than half a decade now. I think Kel and I have been in a relationship since, well, almost 6 years. Yeah, we got together in 2017. Dating in Australia, it's really going to depend, I think, on the people that you're sort of around, right? There are definitely, when I was dating, a lot of it was done online, right? Like I was still that generation where, we had access to Tinder, Bumble, a bunch of those other apps, and we used online dating. It was we were the first kind of generation to get exposed to that, I think, and utilized it as a result, because it was just easier to meet people. And for me personally, I wanted to meet people who weren't necessarily friends of friends or my own friends all the time. I kind of got sick of just hanging out with friends and only meeting friends of friends and being like, well, sometimes you want to just meet complete strangers and get to know them. And with something like a dating app, the good thing is that everyone there is kind of there for the same reason, right? The negative side of those sorts of things is that a lot of people are there for casual stuff, whether you're male or female, right? I don't have any experience dating men, unfortunately. And I imagine it's probably worse with men than it is for women. But even when I was on the dating scene, I must have dated like 100 people over, would have been like 5 years, I think. And when I say that, I mean like met up with them at least once over a coffee or something to get to know them, right? It would have been over 100 people that I had dated in my dating life. I would imagine. I don't know. Maybe I'm full of it. But yeah, it was just so important to kind of meet all these different people and then work out what you wanted in a partner, right? And so, yeah, but even when I was doing that, there were still women who often just wanted a casual thing or weren't interested in something serious. And I was sort of the person that was, as much as, anyone, I enjoy, intimate relationships with people. But I didn't just want casual stuff. I wanted something serious. I've always been that kind of person who wanted a serious relationship with a single person at a time and, wanted to get sort of invested in it and then ultimately work towards having a family and kids. And fast forward, it's what's happened, fortunately. But yeah, so there's definitely that kind of expectation, I think, in Australia that dating is going to be meeting someone somewhere, whether it's online or in public, getting to know them, and then one of you gives the other person contact details. So, you give them your number or Facebook or Instagram or some way of contacting you, and then planning to catch up at some point to get to know one another. And then, if it goes well, you can keep seeing each other, as it is anywhere. But there is definitely a hookup culture here too. And so for me, when I was dating, it was really important to kind of try and avoid giving that kind of vibe off a lot of the time to people. So, I wouldn't be like, hey, let's go out for drinks at 10 p.m. in Melbourne in the CBD, because it's kind of okay, let's go get pissed, let's go get drunk, and then what do you think's going to happen, right? My housemate used to be the polar opposite of me. He would have 3 or 4 girls that he would be quote-unquote dating, and they would always be one-night stands. He would take them out late at night and then be like, hey, come back to mine once they were drunk. It was all consensual as far as I know. But yeah, he definitely had a different angle to the whole dating game than I did. So yeah, I think you just need to know what you want and don't put up with bullshit. If you meet dickheads, get rid of them, especially if they're pressuring you into doing things you don't want to do, rushing the relationship too fast, get rid of them. There's plenty of decent people out there that you can find. So don't spend your time with dickheads. That's probably my biggest advice. Just, life's too short. So Don't put up with it. All right. This is great. Alex, any advice for a French guy trying to seduce a beautiful woman on the Gold Coast? She's my crush. Oh, mate, I'm no expert in terms of seduction or in terms of being French. I would say probably just, talk to her. I think the French accent, especially with guys, is seen as pretty attractive by women. The fine line that you probably have to tread, and this may get some pushback, is that French guys have a reputation for being a bit sleazy, right? So don't hate me. I know it's the same for plenty of other nationalities, probably Australians included, but definitely in Australia there is that stereotype. So if you can avoid, push something over. If you can avoid coming off that way, then I think that's probably going to be, a massive green tick of approval for this chick. But I don't know, who knows? Maybe she's into the sleazy type. So maybe you'll have to switch it up and do the whole French sleazy thing and she'll love it. I don't know. But yeah, I would say just be you, mate. Be you. And if she's not into it, find someone who is. As relationship and dating advice from Dad Pete. Okay. Let's keep going. Okay. Hi. Thank you for being a perfect teacher. Oh, thanks, Chris. For getting permission, should I use may or can? You can use either, obviously. Both of those can be used to ask permission to do something. So you could say, can I have $5? May I have $5? May is more formal, right? It's politer to use may. It's definitely a higher register in terms of, asking for permission in English. Whether it's Australian English or another form of English, may is definitely higher up there in terms of, formality. So you could use either, but can, there's nothing wrong with using can, especially, in normal situations, whether you're at work, whether you're with friends, whether you're with family. If you're speaking English, you can pretty much use either, but if you use may all the time, it's going to probably come off a little strange because you're kind of being like over polite all the time, especially if you are in informal situations and you are using really, really polite language. It can kind of just be a bit weird. It gives off a sort of strange vibe. And I'm sure it's the same in any language when there's a mismatch between the situation you're in and the language that you're using, right? Whether it's swearing, whether it's formality, whether it's the type of pronouns that you're using for people, to be polite, to be informal. If you end up using them in the wrong situation, you can end up offending people. But you can also just kind of set a weird tone, which is the case with, say, may or can. If you keep using may, people will be like, why is this guy being so polite all the time? We're just you don't have to do that with me. We're in a sort of casual situation. You don't have to be that formal. How do you pronounce the word quote? From Fatima, quote. So this is Quote, quote. So it sounds like Kwote, quote. So it's the O vowel sound, O in Australian English. I know this is hard for you guys. O, quote, quote. At the start you have a K and the W. I think it's a semi-vowel sound or a semi-consonant. W. So K, W, Qu. And then a T at the end. Quote. And you can mute the T. Quote. So that's how you say it, quote. But yeah, it definitely does look confusing. Often, I think almost always, except for the word Qantas, you're going to see Q and U together to make a K or Qu sound, right? Sometimes, like, trying to think of a good example where it's not Qu. Q. I guess Q, right? Q. I have to sit down and think about this. Most of the time it's Qu. Suffices to say. Okay. Baptiste. Hi, Pete. I was asking myself how much time I need to spend to have the Australian accent. Okay, so this is a good question. Obviously, guys, if you want to work on your Australian English, quick plug, check out my Australian pronunciation course. It's on the website. Go to aussieenglish.com.au/APC, Australian pronunciation course, APC. So how much time? It's going to depend on quite a few different things, but I would say, and again, what your goal is, are you trying to literally sound exactly like an Australian and like a native, right? Which is pretty much unobtainable for the average human being to sound completely like a native speaker of any other language when they haven't grown up there. Or are you trying to sound more Australian, which is something that anyone can achieve? So I guess it depends where along that kind of continuum between, having no accent and sounding like a native speaker all the way to having, effectively 100% foreign accent you want to land, Whereabouts do you want to land in there? If it's, halfway, a little closer than halfway to sounding like a native speaker from Australia, it's probably going to take a few months, maybe even longer, and it's the kind of thing that takes, you need to be practicing it pretty much forever, right? Like I speak French and I speak Portuguese, and I have learnt French since I was, probably more than half my life I've been able to speak French now. And again, my fluency is horrible, but in terms of when I started learning it, I think, I would have been 12 when I first started learning French. And if I were to dive back into French and try and get good at fluency again, I'm still going to be paying attention to my pronunciation, working on it, doing exercises, paying attention to the way in which they do or don't intonate, all those sorts of things. So it's an ongoing thing. That's one of the first things to point out. It's like going to the gym and getting fit. You don't just go, can I go to the gym for 3 months, get fit, and then never go again, right? You're going to lose your fitness. It's the same sort of thing with pronunciation. If you don't work on it, pay attention to it, and keep trying to improve it, it's the kind of thing that's either going to stagnate and not improve anymore, or it's going to get worse. And I've heard that happen with a lot of people. My wife included. I love it a bits, but at the moment she's not actively practicing her English besides using it. So often she's started making mistakes that she hadn't made when she had just stopped or was still learning English at the time, right? So she came to Australia and was studying English at a school, got really fluent and had a really high level, and she still does, absolutely she still does, but she started kind of making mistakes that she didn't make in the past, and I think it's just not paying attention, not actively being, in that sort of learning, studying kind of mindset. And it's exactly the same for me in Portuguese. My Portuguese has probably gotten worse since I stopped studying it actively. Same with my French, has definitely gotten worse. So it's something, long story short, you need to have the expectation that it's something that you're going to have to work on forever, effectively. That doesn't mean you need to spend hours and hours and hours a day doing it. It just means that, don't have that kind of misconception that you can just study it for a month and then never think about it again. Now, in all honesty, if you were to sign up for my pronunciation course, you could get good results within a few weeks. It just depends on how much work you're going to put in, right? Like if you were at university and studying a degree in biology, you can finish that degree in 3 years if you study it every single day. You could also study part-time and finish it in 6 years or 9 years, or not finish it at all, right? And it's all about how much time you're putting in. So I would say that, if you are really dead set, motivated to do this, and you are going to put in time every single day, half an hour here, an hour there, 15 minutes there, you're going to get results really quickly, and it's going to pay off, right? Now, what I would do is pair it, so get the Australian pronunciation course and pair it with either having a tutor of some kind who is an Australian and speaks Australian English and can give you specific feedback on the Australian accent, or if you have friends and family who are Australians, people that you can talk to about this, right? So that's one of the big things too. It's going to be studying in your own time with materials and exercises and tutorials inside the course, but then it's also about getting external feedback from other people, asking them, is this correct? Is this wrong? Do you notice anything that I'm doing that sounds unnatural to you? Which parts should I focus on? Are there mistakes that I am repeatedly making all the time? Those sorts of questions are the kinds of things you want to get feedback on that are harder to answer if it's just you thinking about your own ability, whatever it is that you're trying to study. Like with me in guitar at the moment, I'm sort of practicing on my own, but I know I need to get feedback from someone else because I've got, I'm sure, loads of bad habits, blind spots, things that I'm awful at that I don't even realize, and no amount of just Googling it is going to, help me work it out, or at least it's going to be less efficient. So hopefully that helps. Okay. G'day, mate. Kindly, what about the Australian work environment for non-Australians. Okay, so you're asking me what sort of information I can give you about the work environment for non-Australians. It's going to depend, obviously, on the place that you're working. There's places in Australia that are incredibly professional, where you're going to have to use very formal language. The kinds of relationships that you'll have with people in these situations may be very formal in terms of like, you don't necessarily get to just become really good friends with these people. It's like a very work professional relationship, and then, you know, you have your friends elsewhere. All the way down to jobs where you can be really good friends with people that you work with, and it's very informal, everyone's very friendly. So I think it's probably the same thing kind of anywhere. It's going to depend on the job that you're doing. So, you know, if you're a tradie here in Australia, a tradesperson, a plumber, an electrician, you're probably going to work in a much more informal environment where you can hang out with the guys you work with, you can go drinking after work, you know, perhaps you can use really informal language. You know, one of those stereotypes is that tradies swear a lot. So there's that end of it. And then it'll go all the way up to, say, working in a hospital, or being a lawyer, or being an architect, or a scientist, and working in places where it isn't okay to swear all the time. Unless perhaps you're studying, you know, swearing. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's going to be places in Australia that are awful to work in, and there are going to be places in Australia that are amazing to work in. It's really going to be case by case dependent. So yeah, that's about as best I can do, I think, with this question. And I'm probably really the wrong kind of person to ask because, to be honest, I've never had a full-time job on a contract or anything like that, right? Like, I studied at university. I always had jobs where I was working part-time, but it was, you know, as a waiter or in a restaurant or in a cafe or, you know, in a factory or something. Never in like a proper professional kind of, you know, environment, like a hospital or a firm of some kind or whatever. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But just look into it, you know, especially look into it with regards to the industry that you're interested in. So if you are curious about working in Australia as an architect or something, there should be people that you can talk to somewhere about this, you know, in Australia or not, to learn much more about these things and get an idea of what it's like. I think too, just be open to the fact that you may get a job and start working there and just have to get a feel for what it's like, because you may end up working in one place and it's a certain way, and then you go to another place where you're doing exactly the same job, but the culture that they have at that place is completely different. Okay, what are some common phrases to use when returning a voicemail? Good one. So this one comes from Wanda Payne. Okay, so someone's left you a voicemail, they've called you on the phone and they're like, oh, hey Pete, you know, I'm calling because blah, 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 blah. Call me back when you get time, and then they've hung up. So it's going to depend obviously on whether or not the person answers the phone, right? Like if you have to leave a message, you could say something like, hey Jeff, just returning your call about X. Obviously you're not there right now. Just call me back when you're free, or call me back at this time, or shoot me a message, shoot me an email. That's a good one too. Using something like shoot as in send. So you can say, shoot me a text, send me a text. Shoot me an email, send me an email. Shoot me a letter. I guess you could do it that way too. Send me a letter in the mail, shoot me a letter. But yeah, shoot is a good kind of informal way of saying send. If they did answer the phone, you could just say, you know, hey, it's Pete here returning your call. Or you just called me and I missed it. Sorry about that. I'm returning your call. So that's a common phrase, that I'm just returning your call. I'm returning your call. I just missed your call. So yeah, I'm returning your call. That's probably the one that I would use the most. Hi, it's Pete. I'm just returning your call. I missed it earlier. Sorry about that. Looking at some of these questions. Okay, I might do one more, guys, because I feel like my voice is starting to give out. How have you been, and how's your family been? What's new? So this one's come from Anand. How have I been, mate? Well, yeah, up and down, and I hate complaining to you guys because I don't like being a negative person to others, especially, like, you know, just being a bit of a whinger, complaining too much. But it's been, relatively difficult of late, for me personally at least. It's just that, getting used to life with small children, being really busy. Inflation in Australia here is going up and up and up. So our mortgage repayments on the house keep increasing, hundreds of dollars a month each time. I think, for transparency for you guys, just so that you get an idea, we have to pay about $4,000 Australian per month now, and it's gone up about $1,000, maybe a bit more, since we got the place, just through inflation, or through the what is it called? I'm having a brain fart moment. Interest rate hikes. So the Australian Bank, the RBA, the Royal Bank of Australia, has increased the interest rates, the amount you need to pay in interest or be paid in interest if you have, say, savings accounts with a lot of money in them. They've increased these to try and curtail inflation, and they have done it probably 5 or 6 times now, I think. So yeah, each time it's, half a percentage point here, half a percentage point there, and so we're having to pay a lot in mortgage fees or mortgage interest, I guess, now, which is, just stress. And I'm sure loads of you guys listening will know what it's like. You're probably in the same boat, whether you're in Australia or not. I think inflation's sort of all around the world at the moment, a bit of an issue. But yeah, there's that. I think too, I'm coming to the realization that although there are lots of perks, there are lots of positives about working from home and having my own sort of business and job, there are also lots of negatives, right? Like I kind of found myself getting a bit jealous of my wife being able to go to work and, working somewhere where the kids aren't a lot of the time. Although that being said, they do go to daycare quite a bit at the moment, so I'm getting more time to myself. But also that she gets to interact with other human beings at work, right? She gets to hang out with people. She gets to meet new people. She gets to have conversations. I'm at home. I get to sort of do that from time to time, but it's like this, where I'm talking to you guys and it's just me by myself recording on my phone. Or it's me chatting to my team or other people online. So usually via text or messages online via Skype or Zoom or whatever, maybe the odd call. So yeah, that's definitely a downside that I hadn't really appreciated initially. Like there's lots of positives. I can go anywhere. I could, do this anywhere with an internet connection. But I definitely do miss that kind of connection and making friendships, having more friends around. That's another thing that I've realized, even though, we know a lot of people locally and I've got family nearby, in this day and age, it feels like friends, like good friends, people that you can talk to about intimate things, right? About your life, about how you feel, about, shared experiences, go out with them and who you can just be vulnerable with. I feel like those kinds of people are fewer and fewer and fewer. The older you get, but I think also probably just in today's day and age, because all my best friends live pretty much overseas. I'm just going to have a sip of my coffee. So I talk to them on Facebook, but I rarely talk to them in person, like where I get to hear their voice. One of them lives in England. I've got one in Croatia. I've got another one in Estonia. And I've got some more in Britain. There are some in Australia, but they're interstate. So I'm sure you guys know what it's like. In fact, most of you probably do, because you've moved to Australia and have left, loved ones behind. But I've been battling with that. I think the older I get, I'm the kind of person who, although I am somewhat introverted, and I kind of like, I'm not the kind of person that goes out and loves partying and like an animal and, is always screaming and talking to everyone. I'm kind of like an introverted extrovert, where I feel like I do still like to talk a lot and be with people, but fewer people. Like I like having a smaller gathering with a fewer people, but more frequently than a lot of other people. I think my wife I don't think she's as phased. She's kind of fine, chatting with people online, her family, her friends, everything like that. But for me, I think I really like, say, going out with someone and having something to eat and chatting to them one-on-one. And just that physical intimacy, that closeness to the other person, being able to see them, touch them, talk to them, see facial expressions. I don't know, this is kind of getting a bit deep, but yeah, that's one thing that I think has affected me over the last few years. I think I've noticed that more and more and more. And, I love the fact that I have kids. I love the fact that I have a wife. But there's just something about having a really, really, really good friend, at least one, that you get to see on a very, frequent occasion, very frequently, even just one of those, and yeah, I don't have any of them at the moment, to be honest. Like any of my good friends that do live nearby, I probably see every couple of months, even though they're only half an hour away. And it's just, they have work, they have kids, they have other jobs, that they have other interests, and the schedules rarely align. So yeah, I don't know. But again, I'm focusing on the negatives. Definitely things are going well. We've bought our own house. We're paying off our own mortgage finally. I felt like a latecomer there. A lot of my friends had their houses in their 20s and were paying them off. And that's not to disrespect anyone who doesn't yet. I was just, for a long time, I'm like, am I ever going to own a house? Am I ever going to be able to actually, have a home that's mine? So that was a big thing. We got a beautiful cat, Peaches, which I'm going to, walk over to here and give a pat. She's gorgeous. She's healthy. She's fun. And I've got plenty of time to do, things that I like doing, where I get to hang out with my kids. I get to do hobbies that I like. I've got a beautiful wife who's healthy. We're all healthy. My family's healthy. My parents live nearby. My sister and her family are nearby. So there's plenty of positives, but yeah, it's the good and the bad, right? So anyway, hopefully I don't finish on too much of a negative note, guys, but I do appreciate you. And I realize how much, you guys really matter to me, and you guys are my friends. A lot of you have been following me on Instagram and on the podcast, and joined up to my courses and joined my academy and gotten to know me through there for the last 6-7 years. I still talk to some people who've been there since the start. So, you guys mean the world to me, and I really, really do love what I do. And I wouldn't change it. So anyway, I've been rabbiting on for ages, guys, so I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I was going to interview my dad today. He recently went away with my mum and my uncle and auntie through Central Australia and Northern Australia on a trip. And I thought I'd interview him and chat to him about what it was like, what he saw, everything like that, the places they went. But he isn't feeling well, so he didn't come over today. So I'm going to try and do that later this week and hopefully get it out for you guys on probably not this weekend, but the weekend after. So yeah, keep your eye out for that. Anyway, thank you for joining me, guys. I am Pete. This is Aussie English, and I will chat to you next time. See ya.